Hello, everyone. My name is Immanuel Onasis Napitupulu, and my student number is 2201030061. I am from Group PIIA2. In this video, I'm going to explain about discourse analysis, what it is, why it is important, and how it helps us understand the way language works in real communication. So let's get started.
Q1. Defining discourse analysis. From this slide, we're setting up the main topic for the first part of our lecture, which is to definitively answer the question, what is discourse analysis, or DA?
5 perspectives and core foundational features. In this section, we'll introduce 5 foundational ways scholars define DA, and then synthesize those into a few core, non-negotiable features that underpin the entire field.
Part 1. The 5 foundational definitions. We'll be starting with the 5 major definitions that show the scope of DA from different linguistic traditions. These definitions are crucial for understanding the different facets of discourse study.
Definition 1. Language in use. Brown and Ewell, 1983. This is arguably the most basic definition, provided by Brown and Ewell. DA is simply the analysis of language in use. This means DA is interested in how language actually works in the world, not just in theory.
Example: the coffee shop order. Form: latte, please. Fragmented sentence. Usage: in a coffee shop, this form is accepted and understood not as a fragment, but as a complete act, the act of ordering a coffee. DA analyzes this social usage over grammatical correctness. This example clearly illustrates the point. A traditional grammar check would flag latte, please, as a grammatically incomplete sentence. However, DA ignores the fragmented form and analyzes the function. It successfully completes the social act of ordering a coffee.
Definition 2. Above the sentence. Stubbs, 1983. Michael Stubbs defines discourse analysis as the study of language above the level of the sentence, of larger linguistic units such as conversational exchanges or written texts. This shifts our focus from small, isolated grammatical units to the way sentences connect to form a cohesive whole.
Example: text cohesion. Text: John bought a new car. It is red and very fast. He drives it every day. Analysis: DA focuses on how it and he refer back to car and John. Cohesion. This linkage across sentence boundaries is what creates a unified discourse or text, which is Stubbs's primary focus.
Explains. The core idea here is cohesion. DA examines the links between sentences, like how the pronouns it and he tie sentences together, to show how a set of sentences becomes a unified text.
Definition 3. Language to enact identities. G, 2014. James Paul G takes a more social approach, defining DA as the study of language in use to enact activities, perspectives, and identities. Language, in this view, isn't just about describing the world. It's about actively performing a social role or identity.
Example: the student identity. A student says, "I just need a passing grade. I'm not trying to publish a book here." Analysis: the student is not just making a statement. They are enacting a casual, results-oriented student identity, distinguishing themselves from a purely academic, research-focused identity.
Explains. The student's utterance performs the role of a laid-back, pragmatic student. Guy's perspective looks at how linguistic choices shape and express our social self, showing that our identity is something we constantly do with language. Definition 4. Social practice and power. Fairclough,
1992. This definition, central to critical discourse analysis, CDA, is from Norman Fairclough. It sees discourse as a social practice, relating language use to social and cultural processes. In essence, language is viewed as a tool that both reflects and actively shapes social power and ideology.
Q2. The significance of discourse analysis. Why understanding language in use is essential. This section tackles the core question: why should we bother with discourse analysis? If grammar tells us the rules of language, DA tells us why those rules are often bent, broken, or simply irrelevant when people actually communicate. The central question: why look beyond grammar? Grammar tells us what is possible. Discourse analysis tells us what is done and why. From this slide, we understand the fundamental difference. Grammar is prescriptive. It defines the potential structure. DA is descriptive and analytical. It investigates the actual communication, the social action that is performed when someone speaks or writes, and the reasons behind those choices. 3 pillars of DA study: understanding interaction, uncovering hidden meanings, analyzing social impact. These 3 points summarize the major domains of DA study. DA allows us to reveal the rules of conversation, like turn-taking, interpret things that are implied but not said, pragmatics, and examine how language reinforces social power and ideology.
DA for interaction, managing politeness and face. Concept, face-saving acts. We use DA to study how language is used to protect face, one's public self-image. The concept of face-saving is central to understanding social interaction. Our language choices are constantly balancing 2 needs: negative face, the need to be free from imposition, and positive face, the need to be liked. DA studies how people use language to manage these social dynamics.
Example: asking for a favor. A. Give me your notes. Direct command. High threat to negative face. B. Would you mind sharing your notes with me when you get a chance? Hedged request. Low threat to negative face. This example clearly shows the difference. Speaker A uses a simple, grammatically correct command. Speaker B uses a much more complex, hedged form. Would you mind sharing when you get a chance? DA analyzes B's choice as a mechanism called mitigation to lower the social threat and maintain the relationship.
Reads for meaning. Understanding implicature by Grice. Concept, cooperative principle. When a speaker seems to violate a maxim, the listener searches for the implicature, the intended unsaid meaning. Explains. Pragmatics and DA assume conversation is generally cooperative. If someone seems to break one of Grice's maxims, like the maxim of relevance or quantity, we assume they must have a hidden implied meaning or implicature.
Example: a restaurant review. Question: how was the food at the new restaurant? Answer: the waiter was very nice and the decorations were beautiful. The speaker was asked about the food, but only answered about the waiter and the decor. They technically violated the maxim of relevance and quantity. The analysis reveals the implication that the food was likely bad, and the speaker avoided saying so directly to be polite.
DA for social power, institutional control. Concept, institutional discourse. Institutions, schools, hospitals, courts use specific discourse styles to maintain hierarchy and control. Explains, institutional discourse studies how specialized language creates and maintains power. Key concepts here are asymmetry, where one party, like a judge or doctor, controls the interaction, and gatekeeping, where language determines who gains access to resources or status. Example: doctor-patient talk.
Doctor. So we'll start you on a beta blocker to manage the hypertension and then monitor your EKG. Patient. I see. Okay. In this interaction, the doctor uses medical jargon to establish their expertise and authority. The patient's brief response signals their acceptance of the doctor's control over the topic, even if they don't fully understand the technical terms. DA makes this power dynamic explicit.
DA for Practical Communication Improvement. Example, technical manuals. DA Insight. DA moves beyond simple sentence readability to analyze the macro structure, the arrangement of paragraphs and sections, for optimal user comprehension.
Explains. DA has practical applications, especially in professional communication. It helps writers understand how to structure complex information based on audience needs and expectations. For instance, an effective manual starts with the high-frequency information, how to use it, before the low-frequency information, how it works, to match the user's practical purpose.
Q3. The dual application of discourse analysis, meaning, methodology, and use in spoken and written forms. This section is about how the principles of DA apply to both spoken and written language, which have very different characteristics, and what the core meaning of discourse truly is.
The core meaning of discourse analysis, DA, a unified approach focusing on how context creates meaning. From this slide, we recognize that DA is essentially a stance. The primary goal is interpretation over description. We move beyond locution, what is said, to illocution, what social action is done. The core meaning is that discourse is language shaped by purpose and context that performs a social action.
Scope, contextualizing coherence. DA explains how seemingly unrelated utterances or sentences form a coherent, meaningful whole. It relies on the reader-listener's ability to supply missing information based on shared cultural or situational knowledge. Focus on cohesion, linguistic links like pronouns. Focus on coherence, meaningful connections supplied by the analyst or user. Cohesion is the literal linking words, like using it to refer back to a noun. Coherence, which is DA's main focus, is the meaningful connectedness. DA investigates how we, as users, use context and shared knowledge to make sense of a text or conversation and bridge any gaps.
Part 1. The use of DA for spoken discourse. Analyzing spontaneous, transient, and co-constructed language. Example, conversation analysis.
Characteristics of spoken discourse. Use. Immediacy and transience. Language is produced in real time, cannot be edited. Co-constructed. Meaning is built by all participants. Non-fluency. Contains fillers like or like, repetitions and false starts. Prosody. Heavily relies on tone, stress, volume, and rhythm for meaning. These features define the medium. The non-fluency and reliance on prosody mean that CA looks at non-lexical elements like pauses and fillers as meaningful parts of the discourse that reveal reluctance or uncertainty.
Example focus. Turn-taking system. A. Do you want another coffee? Transition relevance place, TRP, reached. B. 0.5-second pause. Sure, I guess. This interaction highlights how pauses and hesitation markers are significant. DA analyzes that 0.5-second pause and the marker not as grammatical errors, but as pragmatic signals revealing B's reluctance or uncertainty, which is missed by purely grammatical analysis. Repairing communication. Example, adjacency pairs, question-answer. Example, speech act negotiation.
offer, rejection. DA examines how we manage conversational structure. Repair, like, what did you say? To fix a misunderstanding, shows the linguistic mechanism used to fix communication breakdown. In an offer, the rejection, no thanks, is often cushioned by face-saving elements, like, that's so kind of you, to maintain the social relationship over conversational efficiency.
Part 2. The use of DA for written discourse. Analyzing planned, permanent, and genre-constrained language. For example, text linguistics.
Explains. In contrast to spoken discourse, written language is typically planned, permanent, and produced in isolation. DA uses approaches like text linguistics to study the structure of this more fixed, genre-constrained form.
Characteristics of written discourse. Use. Permanence and delay. Produced in isolation, edited, and consumes time. Explicit. Must use explicit lexical and grammatical ties, such as conjunctions, to ensure cohesion. Structured. Highly constrained by genre and conventional formats, essay, news report. Visual layout. Meaning derived from fonts, headings, indentation, and white space. Since the speaker isn't present, written discourse relies on explicit markers like however and therefore to signal the logical progression of the argument. Written DA analyzes if these markers logically reflect the writer's actual flow, checking for cohesion across the large stretches of text.
Written example, genre and purpose. Genre 1, a recipe. Form, imperative sentences, vertical lists, present tense. Genre 2, a legal contract. Form, passive voice, long noun phrases, modal verbs, shall, must. Genre dictates the linguistic choices. DA analyzes how the recipe structure, ingredients, procedure, is strictly instructional. In contrast, the contract uses complex syntax and modal verbs, shall, to maximize precision and ambiguity avoidance, making its function regulatory and highly formal.
Reads. Q4. Form versus function. Sentence versus utterance. The pragmatic shift in discourse analysis. Explains. From this slide, we focus on the core conceptual shift that defines discourse analysis, the move away from abstract grammatical rules towards the actual contextual use of language. This shift is called the pragmatic shift.
Part 1. Distinguishing form and function. Form is what it looks like. Function is what it does. We start by defining the two central ideas. Form is the surface structure of the language. Function is the communicative purpose or social action it performs in context. Linguistic form, the surface structure or form, refers to the grammatical and structural category of a linguistic unit. It is static and based on rules of syntax and morphology. Analysis of form is typically done in traditional grammar. The form is the grammatical label. Is it an interrogative sentence? Is it a noun phrase? The analysis of form focuses on correctness and well-formedness. Linguistic function, the purpose, action, refers to the communicative purpose or social action performed by the linguistic unit in a specific context, the speech act. It is dynamic and context-dependent. Communicative function, request, command, apology, warning, promise. Focus, effectiveness and appropriateness. Explains. The function is the speech act, what the language does. This is the focus of DA, and it's always dynamic, meaning the same string of words can have a different function depending on the context. Example 1. Spoken language. The indirect request or utterance. Is it cold in here? Form, what is said. Interrogative sentence, asks a question about the temperature. Function, what is done. Indirect request or command. A request for B to close the window or turn up the heat. The key insight here is the use of an indirect form, a question, to perform a direct function, a command. The person is not just asking about the temperature, they want action.
Utterance. You're going to be late. Form. What is said. Declarative sentence. A simple statement of future fact. Function. What is done. Warning or urging command. A warning intended to speed up the teenager's actions. DA insight. A uses an indirect form, question, to perform a direct function, command, thereby mitigating the threat to B's face or freedom of action.
Explains. In the parent-teenager context, the simple declarative form takes on the authoritative function of a command. DA analyzes this as a face-saving act. You make an indirect request to minimize the imposition on the other person's freedom or face. Example 2. Written language. The euphemism. Text. Right-sizing the organization. Form. Noun phrase verb. Suggests optimizing or improving the size, shape. Function. What is done. Cover-up, mitigation. The action is actually firing employees. This is a focus of critical discourse analysis. The term right-sizing is a euphemistic form that functions to mask the negative social impact of mass layoffs, creating a sanitized corporate reality and maintaining management power.
You need to finish this report by Friday. Form. A declarative sentence using the modal verb need. Function. A strict deadline or command. DI insight. The organizational context and the institutional role of the sender override the polite linguistic form, giving it the function of a non-negotiable command. When a supervisor emails a junior staff member, the function is not a polite suggestion. Even with the modal verb need, DI shows that the organizational context and hierarchy override the surface form, making it a strict, authoritative deadline. It matters who says it to whom and in what context.
Part 2. Sentence versus utterance. The key distinction that moves analysis from grammar to discourse. This is the most crucial terminological distinction for DA. It solidifies why DA needs its own framework apart from traditional linguistics. Sentence, a grammatical unit. The sentence is a theoretical, abstract, and grammatical unit. It is evaluated based on its syntactic correctness. Utterance, a contextual unit. The utterance is a real, concrete, and contextual unit. It is evaluated based on its pragmatic effectiveness.
Explains. To summarize, the sentence is an abstract idea, judged by grammar. The utterance is the real talk or text, judged by whether it achieved its goal in context, even if it's grammatically fragmented.
Reads. Q5. The role of context in interpretation. The engine of meaning in discourse analysis. This section emphasizes the most important concept in discourse analysis. Context is truly the engine of meaning, because without it, words are just an abstract sequence of sounds or symbols. The difference between text and discourse. A text, the form, is a sequence of linguistic items, sentences, words. A text is static, abstract, and lacks a real-world connection. Without context, this text is uninterpretable. A discourse,
the function, is a text that is performing a social action in a specific context. It is dynamic, real, and has a purpose. This is a crucial distinction. A text is the raw language data, just the words. Discourse is that text in use, performing a social action. The sentence, "I will be there in 10 minutes," is just text, but when a doctor says it to a patient in a waiting room, it becomes a discourse, performing the function of a promise or reassurance. The 3 layers of context. 1. Linguistic context or cotext. 2. Situational context. 3. Socio-cultural context. There are 3 main layers of context we use to interpret meaning. They move from the immediate language around the word, to the physical setting, to the broader social norms. 1. Linguistic context, also known as cotext. The words, phrases, and sentences that surround a piece of language. This context helps us determine the meaning of ambiguous words. Cotext is the language immediately surrounding an ambiguous word. For example, the sentence containing bank helps us decide if it means a financial institution, he went to the bank to get money, or the side of a river, he sat on the bank of the river. A situational context is the immediate physical, temporal, and social setting of the discourse. Who is speaking? To whom? Where? When? The utterance fire means a very different thing depending on whether you're shouting it in a crowded cinema, a warning, or if a firing squad commander is saying it, a command to shoot. 3. Socio-cultural context, the big picture context. Shared cultural knowledge, beliefs, ideologies, and social structures, such as politeness norms or power dynamics. This is the biggest layer, the shared cultural understanding. For instance, whether saying no directly to a request is acceptable or rude depends entirely on the politeness norms of the specific culture. This layer dictates what is appropriate. Part 1. Pragmatics and Discourse Context. Using context to read between the lines. Pragmatics. The study of how context allows listeners, readers, to make inferences, logical leaps, to understand the speaker's intended meaning, the function, which may be different from the literal meaning, the form. Pragmatics is the field that makes this process official. It explains how context provides the necessary shared knowledge to bridge the gap between what is literally said and what is actually meant. Example: violating a maxim. A. Does my new haircut look good? B. Well, that color is very fashionable. DA insight. The context, B avoiding the question, allows A to infer the implication, no, your haircut does not look good. When speaker B avoids answering the question about the look of the haircut by changing the topic to the color, A uses the situational context, B's avoidance, to infer the implied meaning, the haircut is probably bad. Deixis, the ultimate context-dependent words. Grammatical analysis. This sentence is 100% grammatically correct. Discourse analysis. This sentence is 100% meaningless without context. Utterance. I will meet you here tomorrow. Words like I, you, here, and tomorrow, called deixis, prove that context is not just helpful, it's absolutely fundamental. You cannot interpret I will meet you here tomorrow without knowing who I is, who you is, where here is, and when it was said for tomorrow. Context is needed to anchor the utterance to the real world. Part 2. The Context of Situation by Halliday.
a systematic framework for describing context. Finally, Halliday gives us a systematic framework for talking about context using 3 variables: field, tenor, and mode. This framework is used to systematically analyze how context constrains the language we use.